All right. I'm glad to be here today. I appreciate you guys having me. And it's been an excellent conference so far. And so one of the things that I am hoping to share with you guys today is some of the things that we did in Maricopa County. I was the director of data management GIS for Maricopa County for about 7 years prior to being at Sidwell. And one of the things that we had there was, which was very big to me, was just understanding where we are in our GIS journey, right? So I'm big on quotes, and one of my favorite quotes is, "If you stay ready, you ain't got to get ready," by Will Smith. And pretty much what that means is when we were doing the GIS, when I first started there, I didn't know there was going to be a pandemic years later, but I always knew that GIS was, if I did my job well and I kept pushing forward, GIS was going to really expand to the point where everybody would be taking advantage of it. And my goal was always have everybody, all 14,000 employees at Maricopa County, using GIS in some form or fashion. So that was my ultimate goal. And so everything I planned and everything I did was with that ultimate goal in mind, and also to try to win more awards than LA County, because that was my biggest rival in my head. So I'm very big into sports. So I always try to find other groups that I try to rival with personally to push myself to be better in my goals. And so one of the things that I wanted to share with you guys was, here was my overall the things I really paid attention to during COVID. Our CIO elected me to be the actual IT liaison between public health and our IT department. So every IT request, GIS or otherwise, came through me, and then I worked with our IT department to make sure everything got done and what public health needed. And so I reviewed all the biggest vaccination systems, from Microsoft to SAP to ServiceNow to IBM, all the ones that had those. And I looked at a lot of tools to return to work and things of that nature. And one of my biggest things, though, during COVID was managing the staff. And because you got to remember, everything got shut off, and we had some folks that would come into the office, and their biggest thing was working with our customers and doing that. So mentally, I wanted to make sure the staff was prepared and good to go. Also, one of the biggest things that we had was we had our strategy, which I'll show you a high level glimpse of it. And a strategy, you have to have one, right? You got to know why you're doing what you're doing and where you're trying to go. Because if you don't, then you will actually waste money and time. And what I like to allocate strategy to is like, okay, me deciding I'm gonna go grocery shopping today, right? I can go to my neighborhood grocery store, or I go to Costco's and Sam's. If you go to Costco's and Sam's, you can't just go on a whim. You got to have your grocery list. You got to pick the right time of day, all those things, because you will go in there and literally spend all your money and be there all day and come back with 3 TVs. So that's what I mean by strategy. So you have to have that. Also, you got to know your employees' strengths, weaknesses, personalities, and their skills. Because during COVID, because I was managing certain things, I had to make sure that our staff also had meetings as well with customers where I wasn't present, or even with directors. And so we have some employees that do great work, but if you put them with a customer by themselves, that may not go so well, right? So I had to make sure I was doing that to put them in the position to be successful. Because at the end of the day, if I didn't do that well, then it fell back on me. It reflected back on me and the whole IT department. And then therefore I would have had to fix it anyway, and it wouldn't have been a happy sight to begin with. Also, one of the things I do a lot is I integrate the employee career goals in their development. Now you got to talk to your HR department, but this is critical, because what you got to understand is we have folks that thought in their career they wanted to go and be in a security field, but they happen to be in GIS. We'll have to acknowledge that. If I didn't acknowledge that and kind of gave them the opportunity to grow, well, the whole time they were with me, they're thinking, okay, I don't want to be here. I want to leave, and their work would suffer or wouldn't be as good. But if I was working that in, then they would kept their high level of work up, while they're moving on to their next career, and then potentially we could keep them in the department. So I always look at it as like, don't take it personal. When people leave or they move on, don't take it personal, reflection of you. And I like it when people moved on from us potentially, because that means I have multiple GIS people out in the world that I can talk to or relate to or get data or assistance from if they wasn't on my team. Also have good vendor management and use your partners, because we had things that we had to get done and I didn't have the time or the staff time to do it. So we had to rely on our partners to handle that. And good vendor management works both ways, right? If your partner reaches out, wants to show you new technologies and things like that, you can't shut them down all the time, like, I don't have time. But then when you have something urgent, you want them to drop everything and assist you. Like, you got to do it both ways and give your time and vice versa, and just understand the dynamic. And that's something a little bit harder to do sometimes, but you got to feel comfortable with it, especially as a GIS manager and a leader, right? That's your job to do that. And also, I like to say, have a plan for when your best person leaves. Everybody on the call here has had it where their best person left, and you don't want to be caught in that situation. So even though your department may not have a succession plan, I always had one. I always had was like, okay, if my best person leaves, what happens? Would I actually reopen that same position? Would I change that position and maybe make a different one with a higher market range so I can hire somebody at a higher rate? Like, I already had those plans ready to go. So then when that person did leave, I knew what I was going to do, and then I didn't have to wait. And I didn't have to be in a scramble mode because I did not have anything prepared. Also, for some of the culture tips that I used during COVID, as well as devised while I was in COVID, was, as a leader, you got to be the bad person. And what that means is we had situations where my staff would tell the customer, say, hey, here's how much time we need, or we shouldn't do it this way. And the customer still wanted to do it that way. And so their job was like, okay, leave it alone, let me know. And then I would go and talk to their supervisor, the boss, or all the way up to say, look, if we do it this way, here's what we're going to need, or we shouldn't, because it's going to cause these issues. And then they may be upset with me for saying no, but they wasn't upset with the staff. So when they needed help, they would go to the staff because the staff wasn't the one that told them no. I was the one that maybe said no. And so it kept also the staff in good, working relationships with our customers and help. You also got to protect the staff from themselves sometimes, because during that time, everybody wanted to help and everybody wanted to do their best work. But we had folks working, too many hours and working themselves sick. And so we had to plan for it. We had to say, hey, look, you got to take time off. Even though you can't leave your house, you're not getting any work today. We're not sending work to you. You need to just relax, take it easy, mentally be prepared and together. And me and HR had some discussions on, can you actually force somebody to take vacation or not? I was like, well, I can't force them, but I can also not give them any work to do. So one way or another, we're going to make sure they're mentally strong. And the county overall did a really good job of that. As Corona started happening, we realized it was going to be a longer situation than not. Also, you got to make concise and you got to make decisions, right? You can't be on the fence. You make a wrong decision, you can fix it because you know it's wrong and you can move on. But if you don't make any decision, then you can't do anything. And then that's worse than making the wrong decision. Because during the coronavirus, I would tell the staff, because we would be worried about rolling stuff out, but like, look, worldwide, nobody knows what to do. So you have your solution is just as good as anybody else's solution. So let's roll with it and we'll deal with it as we need. And also, don't waste a crisis. All right. I know somebody likes to give credit to a particular council member, but this is an actual person that actually said that. And they were in the medical field, which is kind of ironic, right? Like, don't waste a crisis. And we didn't. We were able to take advantage, win some awards with our county awards, National Association of Counties, as well as Esri CIO Award. And I asked for resources, right? Because now we did all this great work and the world saw it and everybody was using GIS maps, and I was getting calls from family members that didn't realize I worked in GIS for 20 years saying, look at this great map. Why won't you guys do something like this? And I'm like, yes, okay, thank you. And I didn't know that I didn't do that for the last 20 years, but I was able to ask for resources, and we were able to get a new resource moved over to our group from public health, as well as 4 grant funding positions for the next 2 years. And we're looking to move those over to permanently after the 2 years is up. But you have to ask, right? At that time, you know your value and your worth of your team. That's the time to ask for the positions and showcase that. So quickly, I'll show you some of the things that we went through, which is the good parts. Here was just the vision from our strategic plan. If you look at the bottom right, it was on the 18th, right? The 2018 was when we put this out. So 2020 was shot, but this helped because I would deliver this to executive leadership and folks that I worked with and our customers, let them know that we were thinking about different things and planning. So everything we would do, your strategy is kind of like, when sometimes people say, oh, I want to have an interior decorator do my house. Or you're like, no, I'm gonna do my house, right? But then you go and buy, you get this color tile, and then you realize, oh my God, now I gotta match the cabinets, the countertop, and my blinds to this tile. And then you realize, you know what? I just spent $5,000 on tile, and now my house is uber dark and I don't like it. Now I gotta spend more money to fix it. That's what happens when you don't have a strategy in GIS. Okay, so you want to have it so you know how you're going and using it. And then you want to use it. Everything you do relates to something in your strategy. And so this was good because this also helped too when folks will reach out to the board or supervisors or my leadership and say, hey, we want to sell you some Internet of Things technology. Oh, GIS is kind of looking at that. Go talk to David. So it was great because they would send stuff my way versus potentially me go buying it and then telling me to make it work. Also, we had our environment security. Security is really important. You got to make sure you know what your security looks like for your actual organization. You got to go into a lot of depth, but high level. And we want to make sure our security was important. So that built the trust value with our customers, which was public health. And we had our staff was TOC certified, which is Terminal Operation Certification, which means they can look at criminal justice information, and they had to get extra fingerprinting. And we had certain servers that only those individuals could see and the other folks couldn't. And so we made this and we would hand this out and say, here's what our security looks like, and here's how we protect your data. Once again, I always tell folks, if you don't put it in writing, it doesn't mean anything. And since I put something this beautiful in writing and handed it out to people, they automatically assume I must be doing that. So it helped build the trust level. And I was doing it as well, which we did an extra bonus. Here's some of the numbers that we were pushing out during COVID. Over 50 apps, dashboards, and surveys, 1.5 million hits since August. Now they're up to 2.5. And then we was having so many downloads. Now, open data page, we had it was up beforehand, but it wasn't getting as used as much as we liked. But then when COVID happened, public health was getting calls and emails they couldn't keep up with. So we started putting the raw data on the open data site so people could download it and look at our maps. And that put the trust level up for our data that we were showing tremendously high, because they're like, why would you put the data out, that raw data out, if you didn't trust it? And so it worked out uber nice, and the customers loved it to that point. Now, of course, you may not need to build as many apps and dashboards and surveys. We just had specific tasks that had to go out. But because we had our strategy and our environment was set, we didn't have to worry about architecture in our environment. We could just push out the applications to help the actual customers. And we'll showcase some few of those moving forward. And as we all know in GIS, right? GIS, a lot of folks was using it, was aware of it, but then it became like mainstream, like your cell phone during COVID. And so we tracked this. Like we would look at the articles, and I would look at what they were saying on Twitter. And the way I tracked what we were doing is we had 5 situations where there was data discrepancies. 2 was discovered by the public, and 3 was discovered by my team, and we were able to adjust and explain those before anybody noticed. Think about that. Millions of records, like 10 million records and all that, and only 5 situations where there was a data discrepancy. And our biggest one was the tweet that we all liked and got the biggest laugh at was right here, where it says, me of Maricopa County GIS department was a K-pop band. That really excited the team. And they actually put in the articles, they were actually like, well, could you guys do time delay and some of these other things? And we were working on some of those things, those suggestions that they put in the article. So it was really cool. Our school opening dashboard was one of the school opening maps. was one of the first ones that we put together that really showed the trust and how well GIS could handle. And we use Google Analytics to track all the hits and everything on the site. And then you could use this as Data Studio from Google, which is free. And you could use this to track that. This was big because on the bottom right-hand corner where it shows device types, we had a situation where there was a nice discussion about who was going to use the dashboard initially. So it was initially designed for administrators of the school systems only, but we were putting it public. And so that's where we came in. It was like, look, if you put anything public with this type of data, everybody and their mom is going to use this. And it was discussed like, well, this is only for administration. And it doesn't have to be as mobile friendly. So when we tracked it, as you can see, 61.4%, everybody has used it since, use it on the mobile phone. And so that helped build our trust with our customers so they can understand like we do have to take that extra care to make sure it's mobile friendly. And I always, like I said, I always like to have metrics, right? Because when you show metrics, then people are debating whether they trust the metrics, not whether they trust you or not. And so metrics always do a good job of talking. Also, this was our current workflow. This was the actual workflow because we showed the map, right? And it looks awesome. And everybody's like, oh my God, you did that in 2 weeks. They don't know behind the scenes what it took. And as I was saying is one of the things about medical records is similar to broadband. It seems like this mythical unicorn that we're all trying to share electronic records, but we quite don't share it all the way down to the pharmacy level or the general doctor. And so that was the biggest thing, right? We were getting this data in, and then we had to maneuver it and tweak it and massage it a little bit to make sure that it would actually go into GIS and then do all these things. As you can see in the orange, those are all the manual processes we had to do, which also meant that multiple people on the team had to know the process, because if one person got sick, family member got sick or passed away, then they would have to leave, or somebody just left and went to another paying job, then we would be in a bind. So over a month period of work, we were able to automate it all. So then it turned into now is a fully blown automated process to produce that data. Also, it took that long because in the early stages, as we all know, everybody from the federal government to the state to even the county everybody didn't know how they wanted to calculate if a school be open, if it's not COVID-like illness and all that. And so that kept changing also the process.
David, about 2 minutes.
Okay. So, and then for this one, this is the last one that I'll showcase for you guys, is that process we had, everybody had to check the data and they had to use it with Excel spreadsheet. And to check it through Excel spreadsheet was taking 2 hours. So we built this dash to help the individuals check all the data and verify that the formulas was working. And it dropped it down to 15 minutes. And as you can see on the right-hand side with weeks 1 through 4, to get to the learning scenario of hybrid, you had to have certain color codes and everything. And that helped to make sure everything checked out well. So this was just some of the apps that we had. And the last one was PPE distribution workforce. We had never delivered data or delivered actual supplies to actual facilities. And now we had to on a large, massive scale. We were able to put this out in a week and work with it. So those are just some of the things that we had to showcase to put out there. And I want to showcase that with you guys today. So is there any questions?
Awesome stuff. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. We do have some questions. First and foremost, were you able to leverage some federal or state funding for this effort?
Yes. So we were able to use the CARES funding for a lot of the credits that we were doing, because we had it where we were using our geocoder, but then we had to double check the things our geocoder fell out. And so we were using Esri's geocoder, and we were able to do that. Now, to help with that, I was working with Esri to make sure we kind of put on the quotes exactly what those credits went to, because we all know in 2 years there's going to be an audit coming, and I wanted to make sure I was tight on the audit to let them know that we only use that for public health.
Right on. Good. What did you develop and learn from the COVID response that you could implement in other systems or situations?
Yeah. So one of the things that we did develop was just make on the GIS side, the automation. making sure your system and architecture is set up to do automation, and understanding that when you get data from different agencies, it's going to come as Excel files a lot of time, and have that automation put together and built up. Also integrating with Office 365 to do notifications with text messaging and emails. That was big because as we did certain things and we were monitoring things, we needed to notify people that the file came in, the data was ready. And so we were able to use the Esri has connectors, and Esri Survey 123 with Microsoft. And so those are the things that you could definitely take advantage of elsewhere.
Power automate flows and stuff like that. And then that kind of leads into this next question. So where did you get these various data sources? What were they? What agencies did they come from?
So what I would say is they came from everywhere. So we were getting it from the state because a lot of data was going into the state. But then from that same opportunity, we also maybe got data from the colleges for certain things for the COVID cases. So we're doing cases as well as vaccine data. But lucky for us, we were able to get it from the state, but then we had to push it out to everybody. So we elected to do pre-screening. So I had to push data to Banner Health, Honor Health, Abrazo, and I think the top 3 actual hospitals, because then we would pre-screen the individual, they were good for the vaccine, they would take that to the location where the hospital was administering the vaccine, and they needed to have them in their system to then get the actual rebate back for the vaccine. So we were pushing data nightly to all these different hospitals.
And this always comes up when we're dealing with like personal data and stuff like that. Were there any kind of security measures taken for data, sensitive data and stuff like that? Yeah,
so that's why I was saying is understand your security. So we had a lot of our security put in place for criminal history data prior to COVID, because we was working with the sheriff's office, PD, as well as county attorney. So we had a lot of those things already in place. But yes, once we did that, we had our whole separate GIS environment that only like 5 people on my GIS team of 18 could even access. And then we use secure FTP for a lot of items back and forth to move the data back. And then we had the other folks on their end checking that. So we only had, I would say, maybe 3 people out of 18 that could actually look at the actual raw data from public health, and the rest of the team couldn't. They just supported the regular GIS environment, regular requests from customers, or build the app, but they didn't get to look at any of the raw data.
Nice. I think that does conclude some of the questions that came in. Did you have anything you'd like to add?
The only thing I would say is definitely, reach out to me if you have you want to know more about that. I do have the contacts there as well to put you in with those individuals that are at the county doing those things. But one thing I will say is there's a lot of federal funding going to the public health groups. And even if you're not in public health, if you have a GIS environment in another department, I would definitely reach out to them and see if they want to use some of your GIS. And you can still use those funds to either upgrade your environment or do that, and then you can share that environment with public health. One of the things that we did notice was there was a lot of siloed environments, even between the federal, state, and local agencies, and that made it harder. Like all the work had to do moving that data back and forth. But had we already had those things put in place with electronic record transfer and everything, that you could have got real-time data. Everybody kept asking why there wasn't real-time data. There was no way to get it because we didn't have those systems in place just around the country. So with COVID, I do know that a lot of those things were addressed or working to be addressed. So the next time there's a similar pandemic, we'll be better prepared.
Yep, agreed. Well said.